Hello and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Venu Keller. I want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the respective app stores and iOS Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Today, I have an amazing guest, and I know I say that about all my guests, and because I do, I just have amazing guests on this show. This particular person, her and I think we met in seventh grade, and we became instant friends. We were best friends, and we were just backstage talking about some funny stories that we went through when, since we were 12 years old, 13 years old, and the struggles that we go through and how we can kind of laugh about it now. I bring one of my best friends, Amy Tompkins, to the show because she has been a lifeline for me and my kids. My kids were diagnosed, my twins, when they were 7 years old with dyslexia. And I would not even known to get them tested if it wasn't for Amy. And to give you a little backstory, I go home to California as much as I can to visit Amy and my other best friend, Tiffany, mostly. And I was there and I was talking to Amy about the struggles that I was having with the kids reading. And she says, well, have you ever had them tested for dyslexia? And immediately I'm like, no, like my kids, no, not my kids. My kids, they're fine. They're fine. They're twins. They were preemies, but they're good. They're good, Amy. And she says, well, you know what? Let's just take this like little word test. I forgot what it's called. She'll tell you in a second. And so we did while we were at her house. And she's like, I'm going to tell you, you need to get them tested. She says, you might as well figure it out now. So to make the road path easier and to set them up to win. So putting all my expectations aside and getting rid of my ego, I took some names of different organizations that really specialize with kids with dyslexia, and come to find out that they did have it. And I didn't cry about it because I knew that I had the most amazing resource behind me to help me, support me, and get my kids where they're at today. And I'll go on a little bit more with the story later on. But that's why I brought Amy on, because Amy, you're one of my dearest friends, like for a lifetime. And, it was interesting finding out that you yourself had struggled with dyslexia and then had a child that had it and everything that you've gone through. So I just want to take a moment and welcome you to the show, Amy Tompkins.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just being here is just so great. It's just so great because, some of the struggles that we go through as kids, we don't even know. And that's kind of what we were talking about behind stage. We were joking because, my daughter would just come to me last night saying, can I help her with a problem that she has? Because she talks too much and she's afraid that she's not going to have friends or whatever. So I brought up her, she knows her as Aunt Amy. And I said, well, Aunt Amy and I, we've been best friends since we were in like seventh grade. And you know what? She said that I talk too much. Like Amy would always say, stop talking to me, Vina, you're gonna get me in trouble. And here I'm trying to just copy off her work. Come to find out that she had dyslexia. And she's like,
I was not the person to copy off of. No, definitely not.
And then I'm like, wait, you have dyslexia? I didn't even know this. And this conversation happened just like 5 or 6 years ago. Okay. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, but we were in the smart classes. She goes, no. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I was an A student. And she was like, yeah, we were in like the children with like learning disabilities, like the people that needed extra help. And we went slow. I'm like, what? You have got to be kidding me. I was. And I was like at the top of that class. And so it was just, it's funny because, as much as our kids, especially as they get older, like I have a client that feels that he's dumb and he's stupid because he's seen everybody in his class accelerate. And he's at that age of like 10, 11, 12, as they get older to realize like, hey, something's not right with me. Like all my friends are moving on. They can read, they can understand. And here I am struggling to even have the fluency in my reading. I must be dumb. I must be stupid. They're self-harming, like beating themselves, hitting themselves in the head, thinking that they're dumb because they're comparing themselves, which I find is funny because, Amy, when you told me that you were dyslexic 6 years ago, I was so dumbfounded because I did not know that. You may have known that you were and struggled with your challenges, but it's like the peer group doesn't even see it.
Right. Well, in full disclosure, I have dyslexia, I have auditory processing disorder, I'm dysgraphic, I have ADD. There's executive functioning issues. I have lots of different deficits and struggles. And so I was always so quiet because I didn't want that attention. So when you would talk to me and get me in trouble, I was like, no, don't let anybody see that I'm here because I don't want them to know all of my secrets. Because I carried that shame for a long time of not knowing or embracing who I was, because everybody told me that I was stupid and that I was, couldn't do what they could do. And I didn't live up to everybody's expectations and I never got good grades. And it was really hard. And I carried that shame for a long time until I just let it go and said, I can't live by other people's expectations anymore. I'm going to live by what I can do and what my strengths are.
Right.
So,
and it's funny because here I am, the talkative one. Too talkative. I just like to talk. I liked conversation. I didn't like quiet. Quiet made me uncomfortable where quiet made you comfortable.
right.
And yet we were still best friends, and yet we still, stuck
Yeah.
together and played at recess and everything. And it's like, as soon as you got out of the classroom, it was almost like a freedom for you. Would you say that?
Yes, because the classroom, I break out in hives and I was so scared and I was afraid that somebody would call on me and ask me to read in class or, ask me a question. And with my auditory processing and my dyslexia, I process differently. I process slower. So other people, like, they put me in those timed, like, stand next to this kid and do this time test and like, tell me what's multiplication facts. And I was like, no, don't do this to me, because I couldn't spit it out as fast as the next person could.
Right.
I was still listening to what the teacher was saying, like 5 points ago, and I was still trying to get caught up. And so I was just left in this confusion of like, why does nobody understand who I am?
Right.
So I just stayed quiet and didn't want people to know. Or, it was hard because as soon as I got on an IEP, my mom wanted me off the IEP. So there was all this shame. Like, my mom did my homework for forever because
Wow.
I couldn't do it, but she didn't want people to know.
Right. So that's another thing, right? Is
Yeah.
like back when we were growing up, is like, were our parents ashamed if we
Yes.
weren't keeping up with the Joneses, if you would, like,
Yes.
like education wise and sports wise, and like
Right.
everybody was going to go to college, and
Right.
you're not, like you were pointing out, you're like, ours class was the ones that were like, look, if they get a diploma, we're going to be happy. And I think it's funny because you and I, of our graduating class, like, not everyone went to college, but we did, and we got
Yes.
our degrees.
Yes. And I'm going to be perfectly honest. It took me 3.5 years to get out of community college, and I had to
Not
take
just
the
you.
50 and 80 courses. But
Me too. Me
I,
too. I was like, can I please just take a course that's going to transfer? Please. Please. Just give me
right,
one course that's going to transfer. They're like, well, when you can test out of this, we'll
right.
let you go up to the 100 courses. And I'm like, okay.
Well,
Because math was like really hard for me, and I had the undiagnosed ADHD,
yeah.
and because in the 80s when we were growing up, ADHD, everybody wanted to put you on Ritalin and whatever. And, I mean, I think it was kind of apparent how much energy I had, that I probably did have it. And yet the problem though with that and going undiagnosed is that my brain never stopped.
Right.
So it's like it was constantly trying to take in everything and try to get it right and be perfect at it. And I too was missing the whole mathematical facts. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're going to make me read out loud. I'm going to read so slow, because I had a comprehension problem.
Right.
Like I just couldn't comprehend what I was reading. And, I've never been tested for dyslexia. Maybe I do have it, but because I do have a lot of symptoms, it's just the processing of like understanding what I was reading took me forever. So
Right.
I felt I wasn't good enough because people would read the passage and they're like, okay, you guys should be done with page 5. And I'm still on page 1.
Right.
And I'm like, what's wrong with me? And so we start to internalize something is wrong with us.
Yeah. Oh, I had to read the same page over 10 times. It
Right.
was so frustrating. And it
Right.
was painful. And I was trying so hard. And then I'd get that input of like, you're not trying hard enough. And I was like, I'm working much harder than all these other people. Why?
Right.
Why are you yelling at me? Like, I'm trying. I'm doing my best. And they wouldn't ever give me the tools. And if they did give me tools, like they gave me like the old school, like books on tape. But it was a punishment. It was like, well, because you can't do it like everyone else, we're going to give you the book on tape. And then I had to
Right.
sit there with my little headphones, and everybody else would stare at me and go, oh, there she is. She needs something different. And which I was just like, nowadays I love assistive technology because it's built into everything we do.
Yes.
So all the tools I need, I still use assistive technology. I'm openly share that with my kids because with my struggles, and I'll have bad dyslexic days and I won't even remember like how to spell cat or remember my debit card number. That's the worst. And you go to the store and they're like, put in your debit card number. And I'm like, oh, and then they think I'm stealing something because it's not my card. And I'm like, no, or I can't find the right word and I'm saying the wrong thing. And people are looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, sorry, I'm dyslexic. I'm trying.
Right, right. And it's so interesting though, because when I looked at how many people, like Richard Branson has dyslexia,
Yes.
like entrepreneurs, there's so many entrepreneurs, famous entrepreneurs that are millionaires and billionaires that have dyslexia.
Yes.
And what I love about that is I get to share that with my son to say, you know what, this is not going to be a disability. This is going to be your ability. It is going to teach you how to have resilience. It's going to teach you a lesson that most people won't get is that if you want it bad enough, nothing will stand in your way.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing that people try to sell you is, do you want your child labeled? Do you really want your child to be known as, or do you really want other people to know? And I'm like, yes, embrace it. Because if I don't embrace it, someone else will tell me what I should be feeling. And
Right.
yes, I wanted my kid diagnosed with dyslexia because I knew he was dyslexic from the very beginning because he was like me. He had all the same issues that I did and all the same struggles. And when I kept telling everybody he's dyslexic, they looked at me and they said, no, he's not. I was like, what? What do you mean? He's struggling with everything that I did. And
Right.
so I think that's the hard thing is like, up to the very end when we finally got him assessed, I was like, I'm like, yes, honey, you are who you are. Embrace it. Embrace who you are. It's okay. Like, don't let somebody else tell you you're wrong because you're not.
Don't shame it.
Yeah,
And
don't shame it.
it's so funny because even when we grew up, like we knew the name Albert Einstein, like he was like the most genius
Yes.
person in the world, Albert Einstein. Even our kids today, like if anything has stayed the same in our generational gaps, it's Albert Einstein.
Yes.
Okay, like everybody knows Albert Einstein's so smart, and he was dyslexic.
Yep.
Pablo Picasso, dyslexic.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. Like the actresses, Robin Williams,
Yeah.
Whoopi Goldberg, like all these people who people look up to and see their talents have dyslexia. And so
yeah, it's 1 in 5. But most of us never go diagnosed. I was lucky to be diagnosed in 3rd grade. And I remember sitting in front of the doctor that did all of the assessments on me. And I just was small, sitting in the chair, and he put out his arm and he goes, Amy has an arm's length worth of problems.
Oh my gosh.
So
I just imagine Gloria going, what?
Yeah, right? I can't have my kid have problems because I was judged against my sister who was smart and beautiful and could do anything she wanted. So here I was, the uncoordinated, didn't know my left from my right, tripped over myself, needed glasses, couldn't see, couldn't read. I was really good at pretending like I could read though.
You were.
I was. I'd stare at those books all day long and people would be like, she's so good sitting there quietly reading. I'm like, Didn't read anything, but.
Well, it's funny because like, I feel, when we were there, I think like 5 years ago, whatever, and we were talking about this and you said that dyslexia mimics a lot of ADHD. So a lot of kids are misdiagnosed with ADHD and it's actually dyslexia. And it was so funny because you pulled out that list and my husband like goes, let me see that list. Yes. And he reads it and he's like, we got in the car. He's like, I think I'm dyslexic. I'm like, what? He's like, that list that Amy gave you. He's like, yeah, I think I'm dyslexic. He's like, I still think I have ADHD, but I think I'm dyslexic. And I said, well, you could have that comorbidity. You could have both. And he's like, I think I'm dyslexic. And like, it was like a shock to him. Yeah. And so when we got home, he called up his mom and he's like, Mom, I think I'm dyslexic. She goes, well, honey, of course you are. You've been dyslexic your entire life. That's why you struggled at school. And he's like, what? Right. He's like, I am. it's like someone forgot to tell him, and it made sense why he dropped out in high
Yeah.
school and took the GED, because he wasn't getting the support he needed.
Right.
He grew up in the 80s and 90s like we did, and he did not get the support that he needed.
Yeah.
He had IEP, but even now IEPs are, I'm so sorry if you're a teacher or whatever, but I haven't seen them worth the paper they're written on, because I don't think 15 minutes of speech for my child in the class is going to help them with their speech deficit,
Right.
back in the day. So I just, I got the IEP because I needed it to get the services that I needed them to have.
Right.
And it makes sense though why my husband dropped out. And like now my husband's like, what do we need to do so our kids are supported so they don't drop out? And that's when you recommended like Orton Gilliam, I think you said.
Yes.
Linda Bell, and I think there was a third one that
So Wilson, Barton, there's a variety of different programs depending upon the different deficits that you have that you can work on the remediation part.
Right. And we just found Linda Bell be so great for us. So, going back to my story, when after the kids got diagnosed, they were 6 levels behind in reading. Yeah. So they're going into 2nd grade, 6 levels behind in reading. COVID's hitting. So not only are we figuring all this out at that time, the world is shutting down. We are homeschooling while most people are putting their 2nd graders in front of the Zoom and leaving. We are doing school for 8 hours. Yes. We're emailing the teachers going, I work. I am a coach. I have to coach my clients. I don't have time to help my kids for 8 hours. If so, I would homeschool, which I don't do. My husband is struggling because he's like, this is why I dropped out of school. He's like, I could do the math part. Everything else, like, they need your help. And so the teacher's like, well, why are you spending 8 hours? I'm like, right. Because my twins aren't getting this.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh gosh. So they alter the workload that they have to do. And we realize that we now have a dilemma. Do we progress the kids next year in 2nd grade, or do we hold them back? And I remember calling you and going, I don't know what to do. And you said, you just got to set them up to win. Don't look at the grade. Don't look at their age. What do they need to be successful? Because no matter what, they'll graduate whatever age they do and they will be successful. But that's what you want. And so I remember going into the conference saying to the principal and the team, I said, whatever my twins need, we're going to do. If we're going to hold them back, then let's do it. Yeah. And I remember my son Samuel was like, oh, no. I'm going to stay with my friends. Like I'm going with, my friends to 3rd grade and 4th grade. I'm not staying behind. And I watched him just push himself. And we had tutoring 3 times a week, 2 times a week. We did the, oh gosh, what's their program called? Not Cloud9, because that's the math. I don't know. I'll think about it. But they had this program that they had to, Seeing Stars.
Yes, Seeing Stars, yeah.
Seeing Stars was like 60 to 80 hours of tutoring. And you just had to go and complete it. So they were doing like, when they were on their intercession break, he's doing 3 to 4 hours. While his friends are on break, he's doing 3 to 4 hours of tutoring. But he caught up. In 6 weeks, Linda Bell had both of them caught up.
Because it's explicit, it's systematic, and it's done with with the amount of time that they need in order to learn how they need to learn it. So if you're missing gaps in your reading, because reading is, all these different skills that you need. And if you have gaps in the very beginning, your phonemic awareness, your phonological awareness, all these different things, you need that explicit, systematic, take me from the very beginning to the very end so I can understand it. Because I don't learn through osmosis. I need explicit instruction, explicit, systematic. And that's why he was able to progress. That's what he needed. We don't get that in school. We get balanced literacy, which is a whole nother thing that never helped me. I can't memorize very well. And I can't guess at pictures because later on, a lot of books don't have pictures. So I can't guess at what the words are. And I'm not a good guesser.
Well, spelling is like their biggest deficit now, is like blending words together. The IR, the ER, the UR, like there's too many sounds, and there's too many rules in the language, English language and all that. But so Sam actually progressed. Like he went on to 3rd grade because he was in a combination class. So they gave him 3rd grade work. So he moved on. So he actually did 3rd grade, although he was categorized as 2nd grade, went on to 4th grade. And Sage did second grade again. And, at first I was like, well, she did the same program. Did we fail her or whatever? Because again, as a parent, we look at like, what are we doing wrong? Right. And they so kindly said, you've done nothing wrong. It's just she is learning at a different pace, and that's okay. And we're going to celebrate it, because it's interesting because her fluency now is so good, but his comprehension's better.
Yes.
He has better comprehension, even though he reads like this still.
Yes.
And she reads like this, so there's like more of the fluency, but he understands more. His comprehension is better. And we're still on the new Bell, 3 years later, we're still doing it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's like they said, for those parents that are wondering about dyslexia, it's like your brain is a chalkboard and it's a blank.
Yeah.
And people are just writing these lines on it, and your brain's not understanding that CAT is actually a word. It's just these lines.
Right.
And so they have them like air write, which does something with their brain, connects it to the brain. So they actually visualize what they're seeing, because now when I say spell your words, I'm like, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see it written on your paper. How do you see it on your paper? Don't spell it out loud. Just tell me the letters you see on your, and all of a sudden she can do it. Yeah. If I tell her to close her eyes and visualize, because that's how they do, they teach them to visualize what the words are. And it's just been a miracle for us. I think the struggle we still have, and I'd love to hear what you think about it, but they still, especially Samuel, he still beats himself up. Like he will hit himself in the head, say, I'm just dumb, I'm just stupid. And, right now we go in and we're like, Sam, what is stupid? Stupid means that you keep doing it wrong. I said, is that stupid? Or stupid is that you have learned it and you're making, careless mistakes and getting it wrong. Well, they're both stupid. I said, well, if you don't know, you don't know. So how are you stupid if you don't know?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're not then. And I said, okay, great. Because if so, honey, every single one of us are stupid because there's something in this world we do not know. I said, the fact is, as long as you are learning it, you're not stupid. So it's just kind of reframing. Yes. Even the meaning of stupid is helping him to bring him down, because he just and I have clients that do the same thing.
Well, and also, because give you a little bit of backstory. So my son is now, he's going to be turning 20. And I can't believe it. And so we started in kindergarten. I knew he was dyslexic in kindergarten, and everybody kept telling me, no, no, no. So every year he'd get passed along. They'd give me fluency drills to do with him at home. They say, you need to work with him more. You need to read to him more, and he just kept moving along. In third grade, I asked for an assessment and they denied me an assessment. And they said nothing was wrong with him. And I didn't realize what the laws were that protected me. So then by sixth grade, he entered into sixth grade. He emotionally broke down. He thought he was stupid. He thought everything was toxic, couldn't touch anything. And he didn't want to go to school anymore. And he was broken as a person, which just broke my heart, because to see your son crying on the floor, not wanting to go to school, not wanting to do anything, you're like, what did I miss? So we actually paid for a quick assessment at one of the local places that do it for kindergarten.
Right.
And so I took him there, paid $50 to get this assessment, quick assessment. And she was like, oh, he has all these deficits. And I was like, what? I knew he was.
A long arm, Amy.
Yes.
Yes, a long arm.
It was me. And I was like, but why was everybody telling me up to this point that he never had any problems? Which we knew he was reading years behind. And they just kept telling me, no, I was the crazy one. I was that mom. And I was like, what do you mean? And so then finally we went and had him assessed at school. And they told me that he was just slow. I said, slow is not a thing. He's dyslexic. And they just looked at me and they said, no, he doesn't qualify for services. So then I requested an outside assessment. We got a psychoeducational assessment on him full. And she was like, he's reading at a first grade level going into seventh grade.
Right. The sixth grade, 6 levels behind. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I was like, what? Why was the school telling me nothing was wrong? Then the school told me he was faking it. Which it just made me crazy, because I said, no, a kid, we're doing 5 to 6 hours of homework a night. He's struggling. I'm helping him with everything. He can't read what he's given. what is going on here? And so finally we brought in our specialist who had been, in 20 plus years. She was like, he is dyslexic and he's severely dyslexic and he needs all this help. And I was like, finally, someone is listening to me. And the school looked at me and said, yeah. I was like,
That's
are you
crazy.
kidding me?
But
So
I think it's even more crazy, Amy, because like where we were in the 80s and now we're in
yeah,
the 2000s and we still have not educated ourselves enough in the school system
yes,
because they won't even recognize, even on the kids IEP does not say dyslexic. It says
right.
learning
Yeah.
disability.
Yeah. Specific learning disability.
And I
Yes.
had to get the ADHD with it, the diagnosis, because they are,
Yeah.
in order to get the services I needed.
Well, and that's the hard part is because there's so many comorbidities, a
Yep.
lot of times they'll tell kids that are dyslexic, oh, they have a speech problem. Well, yes, they do, but they won't acknowledge the dyslexia. Or they'll say, oh, they're ADHD, but won't acknowledge this, the dyslexia. So you have to understand there's more than one issue going on, but they
Right.
don't want to because they know their balanced literacy programs don't help these kids. And just during our journey, we've had to pay in remediation over, $100,000, close to $200,000, which was his college fund just to allow him to read.
Right.
So, we had the school district's attorney, they told us that the world could use more janitors.
Oh
And
my God.
the sad reality,
Is that the bar we're setting? I mean,
yes,
if you think about our education, is that the bar we're setting? Like,
yes,
oh, our standard is we just need more janitors, so let's just
yes.
keep pushing them by.
So my son wanted to be a firefighter, and I said, I'm going to do everything I can to allow him to get his dream, and you're not going to crush his dream.
Right.
And so it's this whole process of the reality is 1 in 5 people are dyslexic. Most of them are never diagnosed. Most kids, because they're never supported through elementary school, by the time they get to junior high, they start acting out, having all these behavior issues. Then by high school, they stop caring because they're still not getting supports and they're being blamed for their learning disability, for dyslexia, for not paying attention, not working hard enough. They drop out of school. And there was a study done that in Texas, about 50% of the people in jail are dyslexic.
Wow.
So in California, we don't screen for dyslexia. We screen for vision, we screen for hearing, we screen for color blindness, but we don't screen for the basic reason of why children struggle in school, which is a learning disability. So dyslexia is the most common. We don't screen. So on a federal level, federal prisons will screen for dyslexia. Our state prisons don't. So if we never identify and if we never acknowledge the problem and we just keep pushing it along, guess where they end up? They end up in jail because you can't read properly. You're functionally illiterate.
Right.
And then you carry this shame and you act out and you believe that you're stupid. And people tell you this. I had so many people. So my son, he had one of his teachers that told him, oh, I read an article on dyslexia and you have to figure out your own tools. She was not there to help him. And she was the RSP teacher. So she was the support teacher. And it took us a long time. He still has lots of anxiety. He still sometimes has panic attacks. And for me, I feel like what I've learned is that because I openly share my struggles, I openly talk about if I'm having a bad dyslexic day, I openly say, this is what was really hard today. And then I'll say, but this is what I did in order to help get around that, whether that's my assistive technology. I'm learning, taking my phone and saying, how do you spell this word? I used all of my assistive technology tools. And I openly talk about, like, when I go to a restaurant, and they always make fun of me because I'll read the restaurant sign and I won't say it right. And then all my kids will start laughing at me. And I'm like, yep, that's, you have to own that and be like, yes, it's a tough day. And so now, like, my son turning, 20, after everything he's been through, he'll just say, Mom, I'm having a tough day. Can you help me?
Nice.
And I'm like, I'm here. So because I share it, you have to share your struggles with your kids because we're not perfect. And I say, well, I totally messed up on this. I totally admit things that I mess up on because they need to understand that it's okay to admit we messed up on something or we didn't do it right. And how do we fix it? So what's your solution on fixing it? So frustration, we'll do deep breathing. We'll, it's okay. We know this isn't going right. It's okay. Let's take a few minutes. Let's go for a walk.
Mhm.
Let's open our mind. Let's like let go of all that negativity. Let's just get out there and realize, let's give our brain a minute. Let's not carry the shame. Let's let it go.
I love it. I love it because what she's saying is give them an opportunity to refocus. Like
Yeah.
get them off what's making them feel that way
Yes.
in that moment
Yeah.
and give them an outlet to say,
Yeah.
you know what, we are going to just shut the book right now.
Yeah.
Or wait, they don't have books now. We're going to turn off the computer
Yes.
now.
Turn off the computer. Yeah.
Right?
And that's why it's so important to find things that they excel at and give them
Right.
time to do those things, because the only way you can deal with that negative part that's always with you all day long in school is to supplement that with things that you're doing that you enjoy doing. So don't spend all your time doing homework. Like a lot of my son's time was doing schoolwork, remediation, driving back and forth to remediation. And he didn't really, so we always tried to make sure he was involved in a sport or involved in music or something that he could do that was able to, take that stress away. Because you
Right.
shouldn't be doing hours of homework a night, especially in
Right.
elementary school.
I agree. And that's what I love. Like um, we stay in North Carolina right now because with my job and my husband's job, we can go anywhere in the world and we stay here because of the school that my kids are at. Like they go to a private school, Milestones Academy. It's amazing. Like even though they have an IEP, they don't use it, but they already make provisions for them.
Right.
They're like, if their IEP says that they need extra time or take the time away, it's not like they're pulling it out. They're like, the teacher says that he can't do time. So we're going to take that off. Like when they do the end of grade testing, which we don't believe in, but it's state. So statewide, we have to do it. So they just pull them and put them in a different room. So they have less people, less anxiety, less feeling like, oh, you got to get it done. And like, I can't say enough about Milestones. Like it is like the best school. And that's why we stay here. And they also helped us. Like when we said they're dyslexic, they're like, okay, what do we need to do to support you? And, we went ahead and got the IEP because they told us about the North Carolina grant to help pay for things.
Right.
And because Linda B. Bell is not a cheap investment, but it is the most valuable investment my husband and I have ever made. I rather take their college money now, which I don't know if they're going to go to college or not, and use it where they can function and feel that they are learning at a pace that's going to make them happy, healthy, and independent adults. Like that is what I want for my children. And so we rather take that money and use it now, like you and Wade did. You guys made a decision that, you know what, we're going to help our son now. Because I tell my kids all the time, if I would love for you to go to college if you know what you want to do with it, if it is going to help you and take you towards what you want in life. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to bring it back to what I said in the beginning, is that how many entrepreneurs are dyslexic? They are like, you know what? The functional institution of school was not for me. However, I do like money and I know how to solve problems because they've had to solve their own problems.
Well, the difference is in school, you're told to do it their way. And they believe that there's only one way to do something, and there's not.
There's not. Absolutely not.
So when you get out of that environment, if somebody always telling you, you can't do it this way, you can only do it this way. And then when you're allowed to go into an environment where you're allowed to do it the way you need to do it, you flourish, because my brain doesn't work the same. When they tell me to do it a certain way, I can't do it that way. And that's why I was like so frustrated in school, because they kept saying, Amy, you have to do it this way. You need to, you have to do exactly how I want you to do it. And I kept saying, but I can't do it that way. The funny thing is too, like with math, I struggled in math. And they kept saying, you need to know your times tables. You need to know how to add quickly in your head. Well, I can't do any of that. But you know what? I can build access databases and I make reports and I can spit out all kinds of numbers whenever you need to. And I'm doing it differently, and it's okay. And people love that because they go, what? You can do that in a report? Yes. Let me get you that information. Right. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's funny what the skills and the gifts that we actually have and where they fit in. Because, one of our, there was a comment that not every kid fits the mold of the current model. And, Eric, you're so right. Like they don't. And, a lot of people are just,
I didn't at all. My son didn't at all.
I still don't.
Yeah. You're right. I still don't either. I don't. But the problem is my bosses don't know what assistive technology I use. They don't care. All they care about, I get it done.
Right. And it's funny because we were at, we went to Michael's, like right after Christmas last year, and everything's on sale, all the arts and crafts, and we're walking out, and I'll never forget. And so this is Sage was 9 at the time. She says, "Mom, if we got some of those and we got some of those and we made these things, we can sell them."
Yes.
And you know what? If we do like a 2-for-1, because she saw a sign that said 2-for-1, she goes, "We can make even more money." And the cash register, the lady's like, "Oh my gosh, how old is she?" And I said, "She's 9.
Yeah.
And she's like, "I mean, you're raising a little entrepreneur there." And I said, "Could be. Absolutely." Because that's the way her mind thinks.
Yeah.
Just because she's dyslexic doesn't mean that she don't want money.
And don't let the school crush them before they feel like they can actually be who they need to be. That's the problem. I kept seeing like the things that they were telling my son every day. He'd come home from school because he was slow. One of the teachers stood up in class and said, "We have to slow down because this slow kid can't keep up with us."
Oh my gosh.
He started crying.
I would have too.
And right. So we all don't process at the same speed. Nobody you need to understand we all do something differently. It all takes us more.
Regardless if we have dyslexia or not.
Right. Regardless. And all I asked her was, why don't you print up a step-by-step, because he was in computers, a step-by-step process of what he needs to click on, so then he can look back, and because you're 5 steps ahead, he can actually follow along. And she looked at me like I had 3 eyes and said, "I'm not going to do that."
Because it might be too much work.
Right. But that's what he needed. And
Correct.
so it's one of those things like, I still need a calculator. Give the kid a calculator. Why are you making them feel like they're inadequate when they can still do the math problems, but they need to do it a different way? Like, I can't handwrite, so I have to type everything. And so, but they kept making my son handwrite stuff. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Why don't you give him the ability to type it in on the computer?
Right.
Well, that's different. We don't do it that way. I think that
too bad that he wasn't born now, because that's all they do.
Exactly.
Like, they don't know cursive. They don't know how to write cursive.
I can't do.
Well, it's funny because, and that's probably was one of your struggles, because I know for a fact, like when we were born, when we went to school, we learned cursive in 3rd grade, and we weren't allowed to print after that. We had to write in cursive like through high school, and we were not allowed to print.
Okay, now I'm getting the hives already, because that was like you know how many hours it would take me to rewrite something? Oh.
And that's where I excelled. Like, my handwriting was beautiful. My cursive was beautiful. Even now, I do cursive, and my kids are like, "What does that say?" And I'm like, "Do you really need me?" Because I put little notes in their lunch boxes. Uh-huh. And so they're like, "Can you print that? Because we can read it better." Like, I mean, because I forget. And now, like, even my clients, my one client last night, she's like, "Well, I have all these vocabulary words to do." And I'm like, "Oh, how do you guys do them?" She goes, "Well, we just go on the computer and we just look." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I forgot cut and paste." She goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Only if we had our textbooks, right. And if the bold letter in the textbook didn't give you the definition, you had to go to the glossary.
Right.
And you had to write from the glossary that had like a big old paragraph. And if you couldn't find it there, you had to go pull a dictionary."
They would say, "Amy, look it up in the dictionary." And I'd say, "I don't know how to spell the word, so how can I look it up in the dictionary?" I couldn't do it. But then they looked at me like I was the problem. And there's more than one way to do something. There's finding the way that you can do it, the more successful way to do it. But with dyslexia, it steals your time, because everything takes a long time to do something. So finding ways and shortcuts to save time is a lifesaver. So find your assistive technology, find ways that you can save time. If you need to listen to an audiobook, you read it.
Right. And I mean, time is pressure for these kids. Like, Samuel cannot do time. When he's time, his focus is on the time, not on the problem. So it's like, one of the things I'm teaching him is like, "Sam, what's your end result? Your end result is to do the 25 problems. Don't worry about the time, because when you're worried about the time, you're not looking at the problem the way you need to. Right. I'm not worried about the time. If you're going to get them wrong because of that time, I'd rather know that you got them wrong because of the time, because I know you know how to do the skill. It's
Yeah.
the skill you need to learn, honey, and how you need to learn it, right? So that's the other thing is like I don't put time pressures, especially at home. Like I don't put time pressure because it really creates that anxiety. Because what is anxiety? It's the uncertainty in something. The uncertainty I'm going to get it right. The uncertainty that, I'm going to be judged by my friends. The uncertainty my parents are going to be upset with me or not want to take care of me. Like it is so difficult, these timed things with, our kids. And, Eric just said time things sent him into a flight or
Yes.
freeze. It goes in that sympathetic nervous system.
Shut down. I totally would shut down.
Right.
Well, and the problem is with anxiety, it's like a slow drip. So you're sitting in an environment that doesn't suit you. And every day it's that slow drip and just your level keeps increasing and you get used to more and more anxiety. And you're always at, like my son in school, he was always at an 8 for anxiety. So the minute something would happen, they'd give him a time test or they'd say something. Then all of a sudden he'd go up to a 10 and he'd come home and he's at a 10 and he would completely lose it at home. So his home was always safe. I knew he'd break down. I know he'd get angry, like you would say. He'd start hitting himself. He'd do all these different behaviors because the amount of anxiety, he couldn't handle that. It was not productive. It was not safe. He was never in like an environment that understood him. So the minute we did pull him from that environment, he became a totally different kid because he was understood.
Right.
So find somebody that understands you, and then also find your people. Find people that understand you. So whether that's finding the other dyslexic kids, I have lots of my friends are dyslexic because they're my people. Find a support group for your kids, whether that's, a kid support group, you go to a parent support group, you find other people that are like your kids and get them together so they don't feel different.
Right.
Because there's nothing worse than a kid constantly feeling like he's the different one.
Right.
Find your people.
Kids already have an issue right now feeling like they don't belong. I mean, throughout all the times and years that have gone by, there's still, little cliques and kids don't feel like they belong. So, and now throw in this learning disability, throw in dyslexia, throw in ADHD. Like kids are not understanding that every child is different and everyone has a gift. So one of the things that I also do is like find the gift, right? Like find the gift. And speaking of that, Amy, I think that with all the frustration that you had with the school system, it was a gift to you because you ended up going to Sacramento to lobby for, kids with learning disabilities. And you ended up going and talking to them about dyslexia. So tell our listeners like what that led to and how you got to that point.
So at school, I became that parent. I had teachers and principals that would turn their back on me and they didn't want anything to do with me. The minute I talk about dyslexia, they were like, no, this is a no-go. We're not going to talk about this. So I started going to board meetings and I started talking at board meetings. And it took a year for them to acknowledge me. So I can understand, like, I'm kind of tenacious because, I'm dyslexic and I realize things don't come quickly. So I don't give up very easily. I've been doing this for like 8 years now, almost 9 years. And then that led me to joining our local. So in California, we have SELPAs, which are special education that oversee the schools. And so each SELPA has their own CAC, Community Advisory Committee. And they are a group of either parents or teachers or other people in the community that are interested in helping special education. So I also became a member of the local CAC and I became the president of the CAC. And because I started talking about dyslexia and said, hey, we have all these kids that are struggling. We're not identifying them. We're passing them through. I would explain like, hey, my son was getting passing grades and his tests were failing. Like they were writing an A on the test and he was technically failing, but they were just passing him along because not our problem. And so then when I was able to go up to Sacramento and actually just really bring awareness to special education and how we can improve it, because like you said, we turn something into good. Like I struggled, I'm going to share my struggles because we can do something better. Let's make it better for these kids. Like I got services in the 80s. They weren't appropriate services, but I got more services than my kid did when he was going through elementary school. And I just didn't understand that. So When I got to go to Sacramento and talk to the different legislators, it was so amazing because they do want to make it better. But, there's lots of things that we have to go through. Like the school board always tells me, hey, things don't happen overnight. And I said, I know. Here I go and I ask for, because October is National Dyslexia Awareness Month, and I always ask for them to do a resolution to acknowledge dyslexia and really bring it to a district-wide awareness. And so this year is going to be our 6th year for our school district acknowledging October's Dyslexia Awareness Month. And I've also gone to the city too and asked them to do resolutions or proclamations to acknowledge, because it is a problem. So when you don't support these kids, the majority of them will end up low income, on drugs. They'll be in jail. That's the reality if we don't support these kids. But if we do support them, and if they get what they need, then they become successful. And they embrace who they are, because it really breaks my heart when I see a lot of kids and I see their parents come to me, because I also run a support group, and they're crying because they don't know how to help their kids, because their kids are so devastated.
Well, you talk about, reality. I know we only have like 4 minutes yet, but you talk about reality of what they can be when they're not supported. Let's talk about right now what's happening. Kids are suicidal.
Yes.
Kids are self-harming.
I'll admit it. My son went through those periods of time too. And to have to bring them out of that is hard.
Right. And because they don't know their worth. They don't know they matter, because every time they try to matter, there's someone to tell them that they don't.
Right.
There's some evidence that they get to say, oh, wait, you don't. Yes. And so and that's why I brought Amy on, as you guys can see, she's amazing. Amy, I always said, your dyslexia is your gift. It taught you, like you said, the tenacity, the resilience, I'll be patient, because I know it's not, I had to be patient to be who I am today. And so you use these skills to be that voice and that advocate for those parents and those kids that don't have a voice. And I just want to thank you for that. And, I'm lucky that you're my best friend, because whenever I have questions or whenever I get frustrated, I have you in my corner, and I'm really happy. But not everybody has an Amy in their corner. And so where can people find more information? Where do people find these support groups for them and their kids?
So you can go to the International Dyslexia Association. You can also go to Decoding Dyslexia, and you have one in every single state. So I'm a member of the Decoding Dyslexia California. And there's also other local, so you just Google dyslexia and support groups, and you can find support groups there as well. And you can also, talk to your other parents around you. Share what you're doing. Say, this is my kid and he's struggling. And a lot of times just reaching out. I had one parent, I've had many parents reach out to me, because I've been that parent. So, because I won't stop talking about it. So you have to be there, because I want to help these kids. Right. And they need us to talk about it.
They do. And it's awareness. And this is what I say, I'm one to always say, you got to get to the cause and stop working on the symptoms. And so I already know the cause is dyslexia. It's something that I'm not going to be able to give my kid a pill. It's going to fix it. I'm going to teach them how to use their dyslexia as their gift. Yes. I'm going to teach them how to create skills. And the symptoms that come along with it is the sadness, the putting themselves down, the self-beating instead of self-building, the no worth. And that's where I come in as a coach, right? So that's where I do say, I got to work on the symptoms. Well, if you have the supports in place that are working on the skills of the dyslexia, get a therapist, a coach to help with the symptoms that they're going through. Because normally I'm getting these kids that have depression, anxiety, and everybody wants to work on the symptoms of the panic attack. And I'm like, I want to get to the cause. Yeah. This is different. With autism, Down syndrome, dyslexia, like all these internal, disabilities that our kids have that are not going to change, as long as you're getting them the support, the medical support that they need, the learning support that they need. We do need to come together as a team to help with the symptoms. They got to learn how to be self-balanced with their emotions, to be emotionally balanced with what they're going through. And, that was your gift. Like I've always said, being bullied my entire life was my gift, because now I'm here to help kids have a childhood they don't have to heal from by dealing with their emotions now. And, and I'm seeing this more and more, that these kids are going through dyslexia They're not feeling heard and seen. They're not feeling their worth. And so together as a team,
Yes.
that's the best thing you can do for your child and for you. Like you as a parent can have a coach to coach you through, to work with these, to help you find the resources for your kids.
Yes.
Because there's not a cure. This isn't something that's
we're not alone. The biggest thing is you're not alone. Find your people. We're here to help you, and we're here to help you through the journey, because I went through it alone, and I don't want anybody to have to go through this journey alone. You're not alone.
That really kind of just sums it up. And I thank you so much for your time, Amy, and sharing all this amazing wisdom. I'll put some links up from Amy so you guys can find those national dyslexia, organizations and support groups. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.